palms down. So good morning, everybody. Good to see you all here on a Saturday morning. Clearly nothing better to do on a Saturday than show up here, so I appreciate you being here. Otherwise I'd be talking to myself, which isn't the end of the world, I guess. How many of you lack patience? How many of you didn't put your hand up for telling the truth? It's an incredible practice, the practice of patience. If anyone's like hiding out in the back and you want to come forward, there's plenty of seats, you're welcome to. Or if you want to stay in the back and that way you can sneak out, that's fine too. But you're welcome to come forward, I don't have to yell so loud. Practice of patience is really important. I'll probably talk about it a little bit more later after we sit. I'm just filling a few moments before we start meditation, but it's really one of the core principles when you look at Buddhist teachings. And as with most Buddhist teachings, it's not so much about learning about what we think Buddhism might be. It's about figuring out how can we take what the Buddha taught and apply it to our everyday life, which is what we call Buddhism. And most of us, our whole lives, have heard the word patience, patience, patience. We've been hearing that forever. And then we struggle and we face difficulties and we go through challenges and our life is hard and we get sad and anxious and lonely and depressed and miserable. So we turn to meditation and Buddhist practice and you show up and all you're hearing is patience. And the practice is to understand that if you apply patience to your life, then a lot of the turmoil, a lot of the difficulties, a lot of the challenges that you're facing aren't so difficult. Doesn't mean they go away. Right? Patience doesn't fix any challenges or difficulties that you have in your life necessarily, but it changes your ability and relationship to the difficulty that you're having. So if you have some sort of illness or sickness or something like that that you're battling, your patience is not going to necessarily fix it. Patience doesn't necessarily fix medical conditions, but it, as an example, but it does allow you to be with it and mentally, emotionally, learn to embrace it. And that's very difficult for most people. So don't underestimate really what I look at as just kind of the simple core Buddhist teachings and how we can apply them to our lives. So with that, we will begin a meditation practice. A couple things I'll tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice. When you don't ask yourself, is this working? Is it not working? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. The practice of meditation is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos, not escaping from it. Okay? Don't expect anything. Most important, especially if you're brand new to meditation. People often come into meditation thinking that like something's going to happen, or they're waiting for some grand aha moments or deep realizations. You'll be waiting a very long time, most likely. So we're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. Posture. You want to be comfortable. If you are on the cushions, often it helps. Slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward, allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap. If you're on the benches or chairs, also sitting up straight. Shoulders are relaxed. I'll guide us as we begin. We'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important, don't expect anything. We're just going to sit and breathe. We'll be done in about 3 hours. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed, whatever's comfortable. Start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Where's your mind? Return to breath. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgments. Just sitting. Breathing. keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound, each thought, each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. With the body still, resting, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. Most important with the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, it's nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how you sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around you or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awaken. He was a human being, no different than anyone in this room, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means, very simply, for all of us in this room, regardless of where you come from, or what you believe in, or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's what we get every single day. The practice of meditation is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way we responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how we respond to everything else that's happening throughout our days. So all we're working on is closing the gap, or the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. Taking care of your mental, emotional health and well-being is the most important thing in your life. It's the foundation of everything you do. Your family, your friends, your work, strangers. Everything starts with your mind. And unfortunately, most of us wait until things are a mess to try to take care of our mind. And this practice is learning to take care of your mind every single day, every moment, every morning, every afternoon, every night, constantly. My master used to make us sweep leaves every single day. There were lots of leaves. We swept them all up. It felt so good. Look at the clean ground. You'd go to sleep, you'd wake up the next day. What do you got? More leaves. They even had a song we would sing to make it seem joyful while we were sweeping leaves. Right? Alan, I'm going to have to teach you that song. It's a great practice and reminder that if we don't take care of our mind every single day, all the leaves pile up. What are all the leaves? That's your frustrations and your angers and your sadness and your resentments and your regrets and your inability to forgive and all of those things that you might have a couple of. Now you're all here on a Saturday morning, so I'm sure none of you have to deal with any of that kind of stuff. But in case you do, remember you've had those leaves there for a long time. Once a week is great. Twice a week is great. Spending 5 minutes every single day and taking care of your mind is even better. I talked about patience at the beginning, and this applies to your meditation practice and taking care of yourself, that you have to learn. Take that back. You don't have to do anything. I suggest that you learn to be patient with yourself as you go through your days. Because for all the years that you've been driving yourself crazy, it's going to take more than a few months to fix all of that. It's a practice. Learning to be patient with yourself is incredibly important. And for many, often the most difficult. Often we're good at being patient with others. Often we're terrible at being patient with others. But in all the time I've sat and talked with people, I've found that most people lack patience the most towards themselves. And don't be afraid to give yourself a break a little bit. You're just human doing the best you can with the conditions that you got. Sometimes those conditions are pleasant and sometimes those conditions are unpleasant. Sometimes those conditions are neutral. That's what the Buddha said, pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. So allow yourself some time to just be with things as they are. And when you learn to be with things as they are, it's not about liking things as they are. There is actually the problem, because we constantly have these aversions and cravings, as the Buddha said. So we run from our aversions, we run towards our cravings. And being with things as they are doesn't mean you're going to like it. It's learning to be with it as it is. And be patient with it and watch it and observe it and understand it. What do we often want to do with problems?
Bury them.
That was great. Like in one ear I heard, I think someone here said fix them. And then like immediately after that I heard bury them. Yes. And the tone was pretty good too. So yes, somewhere between fix them and bury them, right? And whatever other words come to your mind when we have problems. But it's usually not, I have a problem, I'm just going to be with it for a while. And that's this practice, is learning to be with the problems. Because when you learn to be with the problems, they no longer are problems. Problem is just a word we give to a situation we don't like. It's just semantics. We see something we don't like, we call it a problem. And then of course we have to fix it or bury it because it's a problem. So it must go away. How often do all of those things you call problems go away? Sometimes you're stuck with them forever. Right? So problems, stuck with them, fix them, bury them. These sound really painful. Just be with it. Be patient with it. See what happens. Try not to resist everything. Yes, I get it. In the first question after I talk about this is usually like, well, what if something's really bad? I get it. Then turn and walk away. But most of the things that I'm really talking about are things that are not that terrible to be with. It's just you don't want it. So, good luck with all that. So I'll stop there and just open up to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, and we use the rest of the time. I'd much rather really prefer to address anything that's on your mind. We can go from there. Yes, I see a hand.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
I'm quite new to all this.
Me too.
Great. I used to work in a creative industry, and it was when I was very deep and lost in my thoughts that I would sometimes come up with my biggest creative ideas and insights. And I'm just wondering what the line is between, positive, creative, getting lost in your thoughts, and negative.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the question is, if I'm hearing you correctly, you worked or did work in a creative industry, and when you were lost in your thoughts and kind of just lost, that's when some of your greatest creative insights
Yeah,
came around.
sometimes
Yeah,
the thoughts would run away with me and I'd come up with a creative idea. And
I get
those
it.
ideas end up working.
yes, sometimes they did.
Yeah.
And that would be great if your entire life was all about making sure you created things. So when I was a kid, I was a really angry person. And I was really angry. I took that frustration out in sports, and it made me better because I had so much drive and passion. But when the game was over, you know what I was left with? My own anger. That sucked. Right? So I get it. The question comes up a lot around any sort of, and I think, creativity, any sort of art form, music, right? Any sort of artistic painting, whatever it might be. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of emotions that get poured into something. And these can be healthy outlets, absolutely. But no one can, your question was, where's the line? And I can't answer that. No one can answer that for you. What I would ask, what's your name? Shannon. What I would ask Shannon to explore is whether that's still going on or, with things going forward is the lost in your thoughts and lost in whatever emotion. And I just use anger. I don't mean that was yours, but that was for me. Is that beneficial for your life 24/7? And if it makes you a very creative person in certain areas, then that's wonderful. But do you have the ability to turn that off? Or is say for me, again, the anger always there, and I was able to have an outlet 2 or 3 hours a day, and the other, bunches of hours sucked. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, a further reflection I had on it is, how many great writers or whatever produce great works of art or books who were quite troubled individuals. But we have these things because luckily they did get lost in their thoughts and they came up with something brilliant. But,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And so we benefit from other people's madness. I love Dolly.
Yeah.
What an incredible artist, and what torture it must have been to live in that mind.
Yeah.
So yes, like you said, we benefit from these great artists, musicians, poets, all of them. An absolute, what's the name of this temple? Dharma Bum Temple, named after a book written by Jack Kerouac. The guy was a mess and died at an incredibly young age, early 40s, from too much alcohol and every other crazy thing he did. So this person who suffered immensely left us a beautiful name for the place we sit right now. I'd rather have a different name and have him lived a healthy life. You know what I mean? So, yeah. A lot of those poets and artists and musicians and all that don't always have happy endings, do they? No. Yeah.
Not a good one.
No, right. Right, exactly. That's the thing. It's like not the good ones, we don't want the ones that are boring. We want the ones that have all that fury. So you get it. Just find a balance, I think, is most important with this or anything really, is to find a balance in your own life at what you can handle and when it's maybe time to step away. In Buddhism, we call that the middle path. Finding a balance in your life, the middle path. Thanks, Shannon. Other questions? Yeah.
So as you were talking today, I was thinking about patience. And this week, my worry, and I tend to be a worrier, my worries really got amped up. An event in May that's got me caught up in future thoughts. And this is a time when it's hard for me to be patient with myself, because when it's that amped, it's so hard to bring down the volume.
Yeah.
So I just wondered if you could talk about the relationship maybe a little bit between patience and fear as it relates to this practice.
I think of, you use volume, and I've used this example before, but it's just appropriate with what you just said. When we're in the middle of the being amped up, right? And your question really is when you're really amped up and lacking patience and having difficult times, when you're in it, it's really hard to step away from it, right? So
And in fact, it gets worse because I get so frustrated with myself about not being able to.
Yes, it's the second arrow, the third arrow, the fourth arrow. The first arrow is, I'm frustrated. This is a very fundamental Buddhist teaching. The second arrow is, this frustration is making me angry. Now I'm angry and frustrated. You've heard me say this before, but this is for everybody and a reminder for you. The frustration led to anger and frustration. Now you're sad because you're angry because you're frustrated. Now you're depressed because you're sad because you're angry because you're frustrated. Be with the frustration, recognize it, and my initial response was going to be, change the channel. And what I mean by that is, when we are in the middle of that frustration or whatever emotion, yes, that's often the hardest to pull ourselves away from. And just completely, if possible, redirect yourself. Right? When we're angry and pissed off and we try to figure something out, how does that usually work out for us? Not so well. And then we create conditions that create more anger or whatever it might be. Try to just remove yourself. Go do something completely different, even if it's for 5 minutes. You know, say you're sitting at work or you're sitting at home, wherever it is, or you're staring at the TV. God knows why you would do that. You know, whatever you're doing, just get up and go have an ice cream. Go turn on cartoons. Go eat cereal. I don't know. Do something that just completely changes the scenario. And really, I think and you know this, but the reason we practice meditation, one of the reasons is to practice cultivating being present. And when you're frustrated, what that is it's the mind. It got frustrated over one thing. And then now you've told yourself a story about that one thing for 5 minutes. So now your one quick moment of frustration just became 5 minutes of frustration. And now 5 minutes of frustration sucks way more than one moment of frustration. So now the snowball effect, what you're talking about, is happening. Now you're frustrated for 5 minutes. Well, that's a nightmare, and I hate that. So how about I just be frustrated for 20 minutes? And then it just doesn't stop. And I get it. This is the nature of your question. Being in the frustration is usually the worst time to try to get rid of the frustration. Go do something different and see if that helps. If not, whatever you're frustrated about or being challenged with in that moment, it'll probably be there the next day. So, you know, call it quits for a day and go see a movie. Yeah.
What helps me with patience is when I start fighting myself, becoming impatient, I ask myself, what's the time limit? And where did it come from? And 90% of the time, there's no time limit, and it came from my own mind.
Right.
And that just simply lets me calm down a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And the closer I get to something that I'm really anticipating, more realistic, and the more closely I am in the moment than in the future.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's a great, you know, it's good to develop kind of our own tools and begin to watch the mind as the stories run and figure out ways that we can try to just come back to this present moment. Because the stories, they'll torture us. They really will. You know, a lot of people in this room have been carrying stories in their head for 30 years. And that story you've been telling yourself over and over and over, you can't change it. Right? It doesn't change. And yet we keep playing it over and over and over again, and that's the battle.
You can't change it?
I'm sorry?
You can't change it?
What I mean is you can't change something that happened in the past. Yeah. So if you had something happen 30 years ago and you've been telling yourself the same story for 30 years, you can't change what happened 30 years ago. You can't even change what happened 30 seconds ago. So the things that happen that we don't enjoy 30 seconds in, remind yourself, I really hope I'm not carrying this around for the next 30 years. Because something will happen today, potentially, that you could continue to carry on the rest of your life. Yeah.
I've been reading lately, trying to find some more clarity on the connection between being grounded and groundlessness. And I was wondering if you could go a little into that.
Did you read a Chogyam Trungpa book?
Yeah.
Yeah, you did.
Several times.
Several times.
And I'm still.
And you should stop reading them. Yes. I'm a big Trungpa fan. If you've never read Trungpa, please read Chogyam Trungpa. If you're reading them as much as this gentleman has, stop reading them for a while. He's a great, his ability to teach, again, talk about the madness. Once you actually develop and learn what Trungpa did in his life, you probably would stop reading him. But read him for a while before you learn about his personal life. He's one of the most brilliant Buddhist teachers I've ever heard. And, he was tabbed, just for everybody else who might not know him very briefly, he was tabbed very young by the Dalai Lama. To my knowledge, the story I read was Dalai Lama recognized him very young as an incredible, enlightened young being. And so he was a Tibetan Lama for many years, I forget the timeline now, and eventually left all of that and moved to Colorado in the 50s and 60s and built what we now know as Shambhala, right? So he is the founder of all of that. And he was when he disrobed, he became one of the people. So imagine Colorado in the 60s. Imagine Colorado today. Now go back to the 60s, all right? And that's the time that he was there. And he became no different than anybody else, right? He wasn't a lama, he wasn't a monk anymore. That meant he was participating in lots of stuff with all the people, right? You can fill in the blanks. And, but how many of you love Pema Chodron? How many of you know and love Pema Chodron, right? Do y'all know who her master was? Yeah. Chogyam Trungpa. So when you Google Trungpa and you read about all his, disgusting things that may have occurred, remember, he's the one who taught Pema Chodron. Yeah. I like to level set people because we want to really hate people or like people based on things they've done. His ability to teach Buddhism to a Western audience, I think, is one of the best ever. And his books are incredible. Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism is one of the best. And he talks a ton about groundlessness. And crazy wisdom, it's incredible. Groundlessness and being grounded, they are not connected at all. I think what you're doing potentially is taking what I think he meant by being groundless, and you're kind of looking at what's the opposite of that word? And you're coming up with grounded. And you're saying, well, how do these two relate? You can be, and in fact, you must be, incredibly grounded to live a groundless life. Trungpa said one of the things, and I'm paraphrasing, right? He said, groundlessness and this Buddhist practice is like jumping off of a very high building. The bad news is you jumped off a very high building. The good news is what? There's no ground to fall on. So you keep falling. That's the groundlessness. But you must be incredibly grounded to know that there's no ground to fall on. And he who has read Trungpa, that should completely resonate with you. If it doesn't, read Garfield. So, you must be grounded to be groundless. Groundless isn't a physical thing. It's a consciousness, state of mind. It's a fearlessness is really what it comes down to. And if you're not a grounded individual, you will not be fearless. You must be grounded in your practice, in your determination, in your discipline, in your morality, in your ethics. You must be grounded in your faith and practice, whatever that might be, to be fearless. Yeah. Other thoughts, questions? Got a couple more and then we'll wrap up. Let me come back to, does that help explain the difference between groundlessness and grounded?
And I found myself coming to that when I was finding myself thinking too hard about it. I just tried to just stay with the feeling of both and just seeing what came from it. Grounded for me is, fearlessness, and, the ability to, to have that fearlessness. I need to be as aware as possible of my fears, because if I want to be courageous, I am more courageous because I'm closer to my fears.
Yeah.
And for me, that is, like you said, the impermanence, groundlessness. Be good with that. It's almost like, a roller coaster, just trust me, hands up and go with it. But be grounded of knowing that I'm allowing myself to not be hard to open up to what I think Emma called the juicy stuff, the pains, the anxiety, the jealousy. And try to listen to that and be open with that, so I can see that it's connected with the love and compassion.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's beautiful, and I think, everything you said is really great. We must look at, like you said, the fears. To be fearless, you must understand what your fears are. Fearlessness doesn't mean you're oblivious, right? We have to recognize what are our fears, see the impermanence in them all, and that's what then plays into being fearless. Yeah, thank you. I think I saw a hand in the back somewhere. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Recently, I think when it comes to anxiety, something that I've heard is that a big part of it comes from the ego, from worrying about what happens to you, not realizing the impermanence of things. And something that I also heard was that to work with that, or to work with that anxiety, a good thing to do would be to kind of realize that, kind of take a step back from the ego and have more compassion for people around you.
Definitely.
What happens when some of that anxiety seems to come from caring about people around you that you care about?
Yeah, so the question of when dealing with anxiety tied to the ego, and what happens when that anxiety comes from caring about the people around you, right? Nothing happens. That's what happens. Your anxiety is there because you care. We don't typically have anxiety when we don't care about something. Right? If you didn't care about stuff, would you have anxiety? If you didn't care about yourself, would you have anxiety? Probably not. So when we care about loved ones, family, friends, whatever it might be, hopefully strangers, hopefully those we don't know, hopefully those we don't like. When we care about those people, if you're someone who is, as many people are, one who carries a lot of anxiety, it's gonna get really tense and tight and real. And a lot of anxiety, I believe, has to do with our desire to try to control situations. Do you like to have control over things? I can see the smile. They can't, I can. As other smiles on faces, because you're not the only one in this room who likes to control things. We often like to control people and places and things and outcomes and everything. We can't even control what we say half the time, right? And yet we want to control what's going to happen, globally. It doesn't mean you stop caring about it. It doesn't mean you stop working hard to create positive change in the world. But a lot of this has to do with kind of the surrender to this idea of power and control we want to have. And when we have loved ones, and this is just a kind of random example or metaphor, when we have loved ones that we care about, and we don't like the situation they're in, or maybe what they're doing. This comes up a lot in the recovery world, where you see people who know loved ones and are really struggling. We want to fix them, going back to problems, right? We want to fix them. We want to help them. We want to, whatever we can for them, because we love them. And when they don't do what we want, we get anxious, we get upset, we get scared, we get afraid. And we don't have the ability to surrender control. And we keep holding on to the power we want to have over them. and not recognizing that every person is living their own life. And we can kind of offer a hand or whatever it might be. Very often, it won't be received. And the reason I started with saying nothing happens, because unfortunately, for a very long time, most likely, you're going to continue to have anxiety and worries over people you love. Right? I mean, you know this. It's not like you read one page on a book and you're like, oh, that's all I got to do? Great. Anxiety gone. Check. You know? So part of it is recognizing that, yes, as you love and care, anxiety will arise. And investigate that and explore that. How much of this is happening because I really want to control the outcome? Another way I think to look at, especially with loved ones, is instead of trying to fix or control or get them to do anything, try to be with them and experience what they're going through. Right? I mean, anytime you've had problems or difficulties in your life and somebody comes up to you and you're like, just do this, 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 and this, everything will be fine. Nobody likes hearing that. But when a friend comes up to you, or a family member or loved one comes up to you and says, you know, I'm gonna hold your hand through this. I'm gonna walk through this with you. I'm gonna be here with you. I know you're struggling. I'm here if you need me. That approach usually works much better. It's definitely received much better, you know. But yeah, it's tough, man. And that ego is that's what gets us. Right? That's the challenge, is dealing with the ego. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, anything else before we close? Yeah.
Why do we fear success, and why does that fear paralyze us, even though we know we should be doing stuff that will lead us there to where we want to get, to our goals,
So
but we just can't do it?
is your question your first part of your question was, why do we fear success?
Yes.
I have no idea. You should ask yourself that. You probably did and don't have an answer. That's probably why you asked me, right? Why do you think you fear success?
I have no idea.
No idea. Here we are again. Right? I don't even know you. How could I tell you why you fear success? Right? What I suggest is spend some quiet time just with yourself and ask yourself, honestly, what am I afraid of? Nobody can answer that for you. And I can make up a bunch of stuff and tell you a bunch of things, but now I'm just pondering whether I want to make up a bunch of stuff and tell you a bunch of things. I'll say one thing, possibly. Often it has to do with what others might think, whether it's success or failure, right? Your question is, why do we fear success? You could just as equally say, why do we fear failure? They're kind of one and the same in many ways. A lot of it has to do, a lot of our fears in general, whether it's success or anything, has to do with other people's views and opinions and judgments and labels they put on us. It also very often has to do with views and opinions and judgments and labels we put on ourselves. I wouldn't be so concerned with, you look at the Buddhist teachings, the second noble truth, greed, anger, ignorance. It's the cause of our suffering. Right? Ignorance is, you overcome ignorance with wisdom. So to me, wisdom is part of wisdom, without really defining it, but part of wisdom is to just be with things as they are. The ignorance is giving ourselves a title or a label of success or failure. Your question was, why do we fear success? Why fear anything? Why not just be? Whatever you do, just do it. Work hard at it. Whatever you accomplish or don't accomplish from it, that's what you accomplished or didn't accomplish. Why then label it and judge it as good or bad, right or wrong, success or failure? The reason we do that is because that's what we've done our entire lives, right? When we're born and we're like, in our crib and we're crying and all of a sudden we can turn over. Someone's like, look, they turned over. Next thing you know, they actually, baby sits up. And then next thing you know, they can crawl. Nobody says to a baby, hey, I hope you just crawl the rest of your life. That's not good enough. It's great for a while. Everyone's thrilled that they're crawling. Then after crawling comes walking. That's not even good enough. Let's see if you can run. Now let's see if you can ride a bike. Let's see if you can swim. Like what? It's always being pushed to be better, to be more, to be greater than what you are. Now don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we should just spend our whole lives crawling. Okay? That makes sense? Just do or don't, what's the Yoda one? Do or don't. There is no try, right? Something like that, right? Do or don't do. There is no try. Just do or don't do. Don't label it or judge it. Everybody else, they're going to do that anyways. Whether you succeed or fail, no matter what, people are going to judge you and critique you. That's their mess, not yours. Try to learn to not care about what other people think about you. They got enough of their own mess. So, yeah, for sure. But still spend some time quietly asking yourself, because I think that's where you'll get the answer. All right, so I'm going to close on that. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions.